lucky day. It's my lucky day. It's my lucky day. My lucky day. Don't need a pot of gold.
Do I have audio? I have audio. Wow, that was fun. I had to like reboot a bunch of stuff because it didn't work. And the only thing I have is somebody's Giphy of the person, which I accidentally clicked on. So it's like giant on my screen right now. So, okay. Hi, everyone. You had to reload the stream? Well, yeah, I had to reload lots of stuff too. So let's get started. Good morning. Today is October 13th, and I want to welcome you to episode 52 of Coffee and Cloud Native. My name is Adrian Goins. Every night, I and my army of bots scour the internet for news and content related to Kubernetes and Cloud Native. And every day I come here and try to show it to you. And sometimes the internet gods won't let me. Fortunately, we all live in a world of Cloud Native where we understand that rebooting things or just hitting them with a hammer or throwing them out the window is a totally viable troubleshooting step. This is a curated list of content. I go through around 200 submissions every night, and I only select a handful of them for the next day's show. These are the tools that I would use from the companies that I like, from the things that I care about. It's entirely opinionated, and it's my opinion. But, well, yeah, I'm excited to share them with you. Lisa says the Russian troubleshooting way, use a hammer. That was in some movie, what, Armageddon or something? The crazy Russian dude, that actor who's not even Russian. If you're watching this live on Twitch, click the follow button for the channel. And if you're watching this in the future, please click the thumbs up button on the video so that the YouTube algorithm shares it with other people. I invite you to join the community site too. Links for that are in the video description, and I'll throw that little news toggle thing up on the bottom of the screen too. It's a live chat that happens on Twitch and also in the live chat channel on Discord, and there's a bot that relays between them. So come hang out with us either during the show or after the show, because we'd love to chat with you. In fact, normally at this point I say, hey, who we got in the chat? And well, I'll do that really quickly. We got lots of people. Thank you all for being so understanding. And good morning, Nuno, Vito, RestreamBot and WifeBot, Mo Grady, Patrick L, Svilen, and scroll. I saw Wojtek earlier, so cześć Wojtek. Kenneth, nice. Seeing some new names in here. That's fantastic. Thank you all for joining. What do you say? Let's get started, huh? Yeah, I'm centered. That's cool. I have been putting together a presentation for the upcoming Kubernetes, what's it called? Computing on the Edge with Kubernetes, edgeconference.io. This thing. I have a talk there, which is actually going to be kind of like an accelerated Coffee and Cloud Native, not accelerated, but like a focused Coffee and Cloud Native show for Edge stuff. And so I've been going through all of these different Edge things. And one of the things that I learned yesterday is a term called fog computing. Fog computing seems to have been a term that people were using back in 2018, and I haven't heard it before yesterday. So I'm guessing it's not in wide use now. I think they dropped it for just straight up edge computing. But the idea behind fog computing is like, get it? There's like the cloud and then like there's fog, which is kind of like a cloud or something. The idea is that you have the cloud and then you have stuff that's close to the cloud and that's called the fog. Whatever. I don't know. Tell me in the chat if you have heard of or believe in the word fog computing. As I've been going through edge related stuff, why did Discord... There's like wackiness happening today. Oh, Discord's reloading. That's nice. Okay, so I guess I can't look at the chat. As I've been going through stuff, I'm selecting some of the things to bring on here. One of the things that popped up yesterday, first of all, I love everything that talks about K3S. This shows a nice combination of using small compute nodes and Kubernetes, lightweight Kubernetes from K3S, and some other things to do something actually useful. The example that they give is imagine that you have sensors on some turbines, and these are forwarding sensor data to an MQTT server, and that is then being picked up by Telegraph and shoved into Influx for visual representation with Grafana, but then also running a TensorFlow predictor model that will hopefully tell you when the fans are going to fail. Well, I saw turbine and I thought like fan, like jet turbine, but maybe these are like wind turbines because that's actually a really common use for edge stuff. And when those things fail, holy cow, they're pretty epic. Have you seen the videos of those things where they like explode? And yeah, wind turbines are scary. The tips of those things are moving really, really fast. Kent says turbines for dispersing the fog. They do that here in Chile when they have frost and they need to move the air out so that it doesn't kill the grapes or the blueberries or any of the, because Chile is a big wine country. They'll actually bring in helicopters during the night and they'll just fly them low over the grape fields, the grape farms, the whatevers, over the crops to disperse the cold air before it can actually freeze the grapes. So unlike most things that are like, here's what you can do on the edge, and then they don't really give you any actionable examples, this one does. Right down to the TensorFlow model. Obviously it's a fabricated scenario, but it's practical. So it talks about how to train the anomaly detection model, how to do the scatter plot that shows where, likely to fail and unlikely to fail data points fall, and then actually plugging it all in. And so there's some more training, there's some more stuff, and then rendering all of this stuff into Grafana, where in addition to showing you the actual metrics, you can also get the prediction model in there. This is a perfect use for edge/fog. I don't know, I don't want to sound like the internet grandpa being like, oh yeah, we had fog computing. And the kids are like, grandpa, we don't call it fog computing anymore. We call it edge computing. This is a perfect use case for whatever the heck it's called. Taking Kubernetes and using it to run workloads out where they matter, where you can get actionable data as quickly as possible and, I guess, take action on it. If you're going to work with K3S, though, Wojtek says, what's next? Morning dew computing? Oh, man. Dew computing. We should just start talking about it. Oh, yeah. I have a master's degree in dew sciences. We've had posts from Emmanuel on the show before. I like the stuff that he writes on Medium, although I must take issue with calling K3S the poor man's Kubernetes. There's a misconception that K3S is somehow like CrippleNetties or something. It's not. If you watch Darren Shepard's interview with Dan Pop on the podcast, he talks about how he came up with K3S. And anytime you get an opportunity to listen to somebody interview Darren, just go listen to it because he's wonderful. Basically, Darren was doing some work and he was using Kubernetes and he kept booting these Kubernetes nodes and they were taking too long to boot because they had all of this stuff in it that he didn't need. So he just ripped it all out so that he could have a development environment with Kubernetes nodes that he could just spin up very quickly. That became K3S. K3S is completely functional. It's a 100% functional Kubernetes distribution. It just doesn't include cruft, no alpha stuff. You shouldn't be using it in production anyway. No cloud provider stuff, because if you deploy Kubernetes in AWS, do you really need all of the drivers for GKE and Alibaba and Azure and everybody else? No. So all of these things are removed, but then you can put them back in. So when you deploy K3S into AWS and you want EBS drivers, you just load the driver for it, which allows you to have this really, really fast, lightweight Kubernetes, but it's fully featured. So please stop thinking that it's not. It's amazing. And then there's K3D. Okay, so I sound like what's his name from Fish Called Wanda. K3S is often put up next to Minikube and Kind. I don't even consider Minikube and Kind to be real Kubernetes just because they're so restricted in where they can go. K3S is great. And then there's K3D, which runs K3S in Docker. And so you can have full clusters that run as containers. You can have multiple clusters inside of your local Docker environment. So you can have a cluster for this and a cluster for that. You can start them and stop them, and it's all not virtualized, but they run as containers. K3D is a fantastic way to do development. And Emmanuel's article here will show you how to get up and running with it. Now, the one thing about this that I want to throw out there, well, actually, before I do that, he then talks about installing Traefik on front of it. Okay, cool. K3s it ships with a service load balancer, and it ships with its own deployment of Traefik as part of it, but it's Traefik version 1. So if you wish to use Traefik version 2, then you need to deploy K3s in K3D without Traefik. So that's that flag right there. No deploy Traefik. And then you can install whatever ingress controller you want after that. So he talks you through installing Traefik version 2 and then proxying some stuff. Now, if you're going to do this on Mac, it's not going to work out of the box. I mean, it will, but you won't be able to directly connect to it because the virtual machine driver for Mac that Docker uses separates the Docker network from the Mac network, so you can't talk to them directly. I have a video on my site, I have a video on my site where I learn how to talk. I have a video on YouTube called 5 Ways to Install K3s that shows you how to do an installation of K3D with this cool TUN-tap proxy thing for macOS that will connect those two networks so that you can just talk to them directly. Unfortunately, at the time that I created the video, it was for macOS 10.14, whatever that was called, Mojave, and it doesn't work with Catalina. But I figured out how to make it work with Catalina. I just haven't released an update video for it yet. So if you're watching this and you're trying to do the macOS TUN-tap proxy thing and it's not working, join Discord or the community site, reach out to me, and I'll send you the instructions. And then you can harass me to make a video for it. Michael Lundquist says, I tried using Rancher, but I couldn't get RAID to work. I switched to using SUSE's Cubic, and it was super easy using Yast, which does logical RAID with BTRFS. Okay, I have to respond to that. It's not Rancher's job to set up RAID for you. Rancher is a Kubernetes management solution. Rancher's Kubernetes distributions are Kubernetes distributions. So RAID is a file system level thing. If you wanted to do any type of replication inside of Kubernetes, you can look at using Longhorn, for example, or OpenEBS, or StorageOS, or Portworx, who have a free tier as well. What else is there? Rookceph, if you have a whole bunch of infrastructure that you want to throw at it. But these are things that Rancher says you can decide to do for yourself because we're not going to tell you how to do it in your environment. So yeah, there you go. There are lots of things that Rancher doesn't do. Rancher doesn't make me coffee. Rancher doesn't, well, there's lots of things that Rancher doesn't do. And we specifically don't do those things. They specifically don't do those things because we want to give you the power to make the decisions that are right for your environment. The end. Now back to your regularly scheduled ranting. I saw some metric report something from somewhere, Gartner, or I don't know, that said that second to Kubernetes, new developers are going into serverless. Yes, Lambda is hugely hugely popular, and other serverless platforms, but it doesn't have to be one or the other. Doesn't have to be one or the other. In fact, it doesn't even have to be Kubernetes or something else. And maybe I can go on another Swarm rant. I did some digging into Swarm yesterday. So in my house here, I run virtual machines. Well, I run physical machines that run Proxmox. I run virtual machines. I run LXC containers. And on some of those virtual machines, I also run Kubernetes. And I have Rancher managing that. Inside of Kubernetes, I also run serverless. So depending on what the workload is and which environment is best suited for it, I have lots of choices of how I can go and do things. There are things that don't work well in Kubernetes, so I run them on LXC. There are things that don't work well in LXC, so I run them on virtual machines. And then I have Ansible sort of managing all of this. This article talks about 8 of the most popular, by some metric, serverless solutions for Kubernetes. I've been running OpenFaaS for years. This is from Alex Ellis. Hi, Alex. And is fantastic. I've recently started looking at Fission simply because one of the things that I use OpenFast for, whenever my OpenFast stuff is not running, I scale it down to 0. And one of the things that I use it for needs a faster cold start time. And Fission's cold start time is better than OpenFast's, at least the last time I looked at it. There are other things here that you've probably heard of. Knative, Kubeless, OpenWhisk, which I think is a crazy, ridiculous name. Iron Functions. They used to have and may still have an app in the Rancher app catalog. Nucleo and FN Project, I haven't heard of. One of these is from Oracle, FN Project, supported by Oracle. So if you're looking at serverless, these are all open source things. Go kick the tires, take them for a spin, and just run it inside of Kubernetes. And when you need one thing, you got it. When you need something else, you got something else. I sound like I'm from New York now. Okay, Cruise. More specifically, I couldn't get Rancher OS to provision multiple disks. That's from Michael as well. Please stop using Rancher OS. Rancher OS is a container operating system that Rancher released many, many years ago, and it is now just in maintenance mode, primarily because it is based on Docker. Now, when it was in its heyday, it was wonderful. You could compare it to CoreOS, and we have lots and lots of people who are running it. But if you're just looking for a container operating system, don't go with Rancher OS. Now we have, Containerd and Cryo and other container runtime engines, and we don't want to build an operating system that is stuck with just Docker. We're working on K3OS, which is K3S combined with an operating system, immutable infrastructure, manage the OS from within Kubernetes. Still alpha, but great. Based on your comment that you couldn't get Rancher OS to provision multiple disks, I'm not surprised, though I imagine that there is a way to make that happen. Yeah, I'm going to remove that. One drop. No promotional stuff in the server, please, without talking to me first. Okay. I was looking at something also in the whole edge stuff yesterday that, well, it was funny. I told you before, I like when things like surface. Wow, it's already 8:52. That's crazy. I'm on like the third thing. All right, so there's this thing called Cruise. There's another thing called Cruise. It's KRUISE, and I thought this was the same thing, and it's not. I actually am not going to recommend that you look at Cruise because in their, well, basically we've had Megalix on and we've had Goldilocks on. So Megalix has a solution that's a SaaS solution that does recommendations for optimizations in your Kubernetes cluster. They have a generous free tier, and I very much recommend that you go and take them for a spin. In fact, they watch the show. Hi, Megalix. Anything that can help you decide the appropriate level for requests and limits in your Kubernetes workloads, I'm a fan of. So Megalix will do that. Goldilocks, we'll talk about in a second. And I saw this and thought, oh, hey, fantastic. Here's another one that does it. When you scroll down to where they are supported, it says that Cruise can be deployed to a supported Kubernetes cluster. Yay! We currently support Minikube, IBM, and OpenShift. Boo. Okay. So we're not going to talk about Cruise. But they had something else in their article called Iterate, an open source toolkit which does continuous experiments in Kubernetes. It orchestrates various experiments like canary, A/B/N testing, and performance validation to get the insights on the behavior of microservices and help in rolling out the best version of microservices. Iterate. Think chaos engineering, kind of, but for service mesh. It looks like it's primarily built around Istio, and and the idea is that you deploy some stuff and then you create an experiment, and it tests traffic routing. Either they say deployed in a CI/CD system, so it's probably generating traffic with like JMeter or something, and then the metrics that it's using to establish a winner are going to be based on performance and not on like user experience, because how do you measure that from the outside? But imagine that you have a new function or a new something in your application and you want to actually test it. This will watch what happens as it moves traffic around between the various versions of the application. And over the course of the testing, it will select a winner. And then it will either tell you what the winner is, or it will actually move traffic to the winning workload, which is why I think that it could work outside of a CI/CD system in a production environment. So imagine canary testing, canary deployment, it starts out and then it moves traffic over, or it doesn't if the performance is worse. I like the idea very much. So this is iterate. And we're going to move on to talk very briefly about Goldilocks, since we're in the same theme right now, before I jump over to the tool of the day. Goldilocks, right sizing, making requests for requests and limits and stuff. They have released 3.0.0. I tried to deploy it. I couldn't get it to work. And that was also the case with 2.x that I was trying to deploy before. I think they're very close to getting it right. This is a nice blog article that says that they've actually done a bunch of stuff, but their chart for the vertical pod autoscaler doesn't work. And so, yeah, so this doesn't work. Keep an eye on it. It's from Fairwinds. When it does work, it's nice. Yeah, there you go. Okay. We're at the top of the hour, so we got to jump to the tool of the day. Tool of the day. So Duck just says, looks cool, doesn't work. I feel bad. Like, I'm not putting it on the show saying, hey, this doesn't work, like they did anything wrong. I'm putting it on the show because people recommended this to me yesterday and they were very excited because I've had them on the show. I really want it to work. Magalix is my go-to choice, but they're a SaaS. And if you don't want to use a SaaS, if you want to keep everything in cluster, then Goldilocks is the next best solution. Except it doesn't work. So Fairwinds, you can reach out to me and we can talk about this further, or let me know. Let me know when it works. Or if you've run this and it did work for you, please let me know. Because my problem was actually not with Goldilocks, it was with the vertical pod autoscaler, which is an external component that they rely on to actually generate the recommendations. They now ship a chart where so VPA has 3 components. One of them is an admission controller, and if you run the admission controller, it can actually do bad things if it's misunderstanding the state of the cluster. So they recommend that you don't deploy the admission controller, that you only deploy the recommendation component or the updater, which is and the updater, which is not used. So the recommender is the piece that you need. To make this easy, they used to deploy the VPA as part of their chart, and that created a problem because you couldn't configure the VPA. So the VPA, for example, one of my problems was it would only make a minimum recommendation of 250 megabytes of RAM for anything. If something needed 10 megabytes of RAM, it would recommend 250. The only way to get around that was to install the VPA chart externally, but that could accidentally install the admission controller and create problems. So Fairwinds has a VPA chart that they're saying, hey, just install this and it'll install just the part that we need. That's what didn't work. If that's not working, the Goldilocks part doesn't work. If you join the community site, you'll see that this pops up. Shipwreck just posted something. What does it mean that Rook graduated? Oh, okay, thanks, Shipwreck. So if you join the community site, I have an article that I'll be posting about all of this stuff, including the things I didn't get to cover today, and I talk more about that. Let's move on. Flogging a dead horse. Coil. Let's just read this for a second. Coil is a CNI-based network plugin for Kubernetes. It allows you to define multiple IP address pools. You can define a pool of global IPv4 addresses for a small number of pods and another pool of private IPv4 addresses for the remaining pods. Based solely on that, it sounds super duper boring. It's a CNI-based network plugin for Kubernetes. There are dozens of CNI-based network plugins for Kubernetes. Let's go into the features. When looking at networking for Kubernetes, remember what the actual job of the network is. It's to get your packets from here to there. And that's really it. Everything above that is a feature. Some features are very cool. Some features are, they introduce complexity. Things like network policy are important. But a lot of those things can be delivered via third-party plugins as well. They don't necessarily have to be baked into your CNI. What this does, and the reason I'm putting it up as the tool of the day, is it just wants to be a router. It just wants to route, and it wants to do it really well. And it doesn't want to do more than just be a router. And I believe very strongly that you should let firewalls firewall, let routers route, let systems do what systems are supposed to do. Don't try to make something be something that it's not. This will let you do IPv4 and IPv6 in your Kubernetes cluster, and you can do it either one or the other, or dual stack. You can optionally run it with the external routing. So it has a router if you're in a flat layer 2 network, but for more complex networks, it exports routing information to a kernel routing table that is unused. So you can have something else extract the routes from that table and then announce it into BGP, OSPF, RIP v2. Most routing solutions that work with Kubernetes are just BGP. But what if you have OSPF? What if you have RIP v2? Upgrade. RIP v2 actually still probably has a home somewhere. On-demand NAT for egress traffics. It will set up egress, so you can have networks by namespace, and then you can set up not just that namespaces use a particular egress router, but that, or egress endpoint, or egress address, but also that only certain pods in the namespace are allowed to egress through that endpoint. All of the source natting is done within Kubernetes. That's amazing. They have an example, Project Nico, which I didn't actually look at, but it's using Bird for route advertisements, MetalLB for the load balancer service, and then Calico to implement network policy. And it says that it can also work with Cilium, so you can get your eBPF. Although Calico now supports eBPF, because if you don't support eBPF, you're living in the past. Vito, I see your question. My favorite CNI plugin is Cilium, because Cilium was first to market with eBPF support. And when I first saw them at KubeCon, I was absolutely blown away. And I want to make sure that they continue to get the recognition for what they started, even though eBPF is they don't own it, and other people are starting to implement it. I just don't want them to get left behind, which is often what happens when you're the first one to come up with something and then other people adopt it. We're out of time, ladies and gentlemen. If you liked what you saw today, give the video a thumbs up. Yay! Subscribe to the channel. Follow me on Twitch to get notifications when I start streaming. Links to everything I talk about on the show go up in the free community site after the show ends. That's community.cncn.io. Come join us. Community members actually get early access to the links in the video replay a day before the rest of the internet. I just started doing that yesterday. Membership is free, and the community is growing every single day. If you have something that you would like for me to consider for the show, hit me up and let me know. You can mention me in a post in the community site, or you can ping me on Discord or Twitter. Somebody's blowing up Discord over there, so I'm getting the pop-ups. Cool. Thank you all for joining me today. Keep learning. Have a great day, and I will see you in the next show. Bye.